We started out with 12, and we're already down to 8. The college football playoff quarterfinals begins on New Year's Eve with this beauty of a matchup in the Fiesta Bowl. Now, neither of these programs have ever lost when they have gone to the Fiesta Bowl. I believe Penn State is 6-0, 7-0, and Boise State is 3-0. Someone has got to come away with a loss, and more importantly, someone is going to be eliminated from national championship contention. Penn State took care of business in their first round game, and now they get to go up against what many believe a player that was robbed of the Heisman in Ashton Jeanty, and he's going to be looking to run all over this Penn State defense, which is something that's a lot easier said than done. I think this is a very intriguing matchup, and we're going to tell you everything you need to know about the Broncos and the Nittany Lions, as well as the rest of the quarterfinal matchups here on the channel today. What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to College Football Playoff quarterfinal predictions. We, of course, are going to go in chronological order by how these games will air on your television screen, and it all starts with the Fiesta Bowl on New Year's Eve. The Penn State Nittany Lions and the Boise State Broncos. This is how this all got started for Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma. It's what put them on the map, and ever since Penn State has been going to Glendale, they have seen tremendous amounts of success as well. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, especially simply just by watching this video, but you can do a whole lot more if you want to hear all of my thoughts on the college football playoff. You can hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when every single one of my videos gets uploaded, and you especially should do so if you're as big of a college football nerd as I am. You can like, you can comment, you can share, and anything else you do to interact with the channel helps support what I do here on YouTube. But if you want to support me outside of YouTube, please go give me a follow on Twitter or Instagram. It's at TailgateNate29, and you can see everything else and everything else I do as a sports media student and in the realm of sports media, covering basketball games for a local channel, as well as everything I do as a sports media student at the college in which I enroll in. I appreciate all of your support, no matter how you support me, no matter how you will continue to support me after this, or if you simply just want to kick back, relax, and watch this video. Listen to my thoughts on Penn State and Boise State. How do we do preview predictions here on the channel? Well, we're going to go through some keys to the game when each team possesses the football. So we're first going to go through some keys to the game when Penn State is on offense against this Bronco defense, and then we'll go ahead and flip it. It's the Boise State offense against the Penn State Nittany Lion defense. At the end of the video, I'll give you some final thoughts, give you sort of how I think this game is going to play out, as well as a predicted winner for who comes away with their first Fiesta Bowl loss, as well as who moves on in the college football playoff and national championship conversation. A little talk about what Penn State did against SMU in their first round game. It was an absolute splattering. SMU could do nothing offensively. Penn State's defense, I think, forced 3 or 4 turnovers. The offense didn't really have to do too much, but it was Kaytron Allen, it was Nick Singleton that got the ball rolling, and Drew Aller just sort of did what he had to do. Let's go ahead and start previewing this Penn State offense a little bit more by telling you more of what they did in that game against SMU. Again, it was the defense that led the way. We'll talk about that when we get there, but offensively for Penn State in that first round win, I mean, it was the running back duo that set this whole thing off. As a team, Penn State ran the ball 40 times, nearly 200 yards, and averaged nearly 5 yards per carry. But for the running back duo, Nick Singleton had 14 carries for 90 yards and 1 touchdown, and Kaytron Allen 11 carries for 70 yards and hit pay dirt twice in that game. You'll notice it mathematically. That works out to 6.4 yards per carry for both of them exactly. I know there's probably more decimal points and some rounding and stuff in there, but they both basically had equally productive days, and those two guys are going to be the story against this Boise State defense, and I'll tell you why a little bit later. But Drew Aller, he didn't really have to do too much in that game against SMU. He was only 13 of 22 for 127 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. This is the Penn State team that didn't need to stretch the football downfield to beat SMU. It's the Penn State offensive attack that didn't need to use the mid-range passing game, that didn't really need to use Tyler Warren all that much to be able to win, and it's because of what the defense was able to do. I think the story is going to have to be a little bit different for Penn State in this game. The SMU offense, I think, just had a very, very bad day. when you take a look at the Boise State offense, or I'd say when you take a look at the Boise State defense on the other side, they do what SMU does, but they do it a little bit better. SMU, very good pass rush. They have a pretty solid run defense for the most part as well. That got exposed against Penn State there in that first round game. But Boise State, I think, leads the nation in sacks. They got 51 sacks. It's not a defense that's going to force a ton of turnovers. Only has 15 turnovers forced on the season. But for the most part, they do have a pretty darn good rush defense. That did get exposed in the Mountain West Championship game against the UNLV Rebels. UNLV, they were able to run for over 200 yards and over 6 yards per pop against this Boise State rush defense. Now, this is a UNLV offense that was mainly built through the run, and they ran the ball more often than not. Boise State, for the most part this year, has been a pretty sound rush defense. You look down there, 115 rushing yards per game allowed. That is all this Boise State defensive front has allowed. And you heard me mention the pressure that they're able to get in the backfield, specifically with their sacks. Well, in that Mountain West Championship game, they had 6 sacks and 11 tackles for loss. I think Boise State has maybe not the advantage on the line of scrimmage because this is the Penn State offensive front that, for the most part, has been winning the line of scrimmage battle all season. Only 15 sacks allowed, and it's an offense as a whole that only has 13 turnovers. And when you go up against a defense that doesn't force a lot of them, Penn State, in order to turn the ball over, is just going to have to make mistakes, which as of late, they haven't really been doing. They did it against Oregon, but Oregon mainly forced some of those issues, and it came because Penn State had to try to stretch the football downfield. But when you move back and you talk about the line of scrimmage, I think that's a very interesting sort of battle to figure out. And that's actually my second takeaway because I want to talk about the main key for Penn State's offense here in a little bit. But I think Boise State has what it takes to match up physically and skill-wise from a defensive perspective when you're talking about Boise State's defensive front and Penn State's offensive front. The way that this team is able to create pressure, the way that this team is able to get into the backfield, I think they're going to be able to find some things here against Penn State that works. And even though the run defense kind of got exposed a little bit, UNLV did run the football 35 times. There have been other moments this year where the Boise State run defense has just overall not looked that sharp. Let's go back and let's take a look at what they did in their only game that they've played against a Power 4 opponent this year. That was against the Oregon Ducks. And honestly, the run defense was pretty solid there. They only allowed Oregon 3 yards per carry, 36 tries, and 109 yards. Lately, it's been a little bit of a different story against an offense that loves to run the football in UNLV. Penn State loves to run the football as well. And even though I think Singleton, Allen, they're going to be able to rip off some pretty sizable runs here and there, I think Drew Aller has to push the football downfield. You cannot rely on the Penn State defense to have as good of a day as they had. Now, you can rely on the Penn State defense to have a pretty good day because, for the most part, they're going to have themselves a pretty good day. It's one of the best defenses in the country, but you can't rely on 2 pick sixes again. You can't rely on 3 turnovers again, especially when we get to talking about this Boise State offense and some of the caliber of players that they have, including the running back. You know who I'm talking about. I think Drew Aller's going to have to try to push the football downfield here. I think he's got to also get the ball out fast because of how Boise State is able to create this pressure, because of how they're able to get into the backfield and affect this game. I think that you have got to be able to push the football downfield. You've got to utilize Tyler Warren more. You've got to utilize a lot of your other wide receivers more, Evans and Wallace and so many of these other guys that in so many other games this year just haven't made a big impact because of seemingly Penn State's talent mismatch compared to some of the talent that they're facing in opposing secondaries, Ohio State and Oregon, with some of the talent they actually have on the outside. Penn State's wide receivers can match up against Boise State's defensive backs here. I think Drew Aller is going to have to find a nice rhythm throwing the football downfield because it's also where Boise State is susceptible. It is their secondary. But the Bronco defense has got to be able to find a way to shift the momentum. Now, they can do that with getting Penn State behind the sticks and getting into the backfield, generating sacks, generating tackles for loss. But I think, I told you earlier, it's the Boise State defense that doesn't really force a lot of turnovers. I think they're going to have to force at least one, maybe two, in order to generate some momentum, because this Penn State defense is great at generating momentum. And what they did last week, well, I say last week, but it really was actually, as of recording this video, almost a week ago. I'm recording this on Friday. Of course, it happened on Saturday, last Saturday, the Penn State and SMU game. But you heard me say it just a little bit ago in this video. 2 pick sixes and 3 total interceptions, 2 of which by Dominic DeLuca, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that last name right. But this Penn State defense is good enough to do that on a week-to-week basis, but it's not going to, right? Because that's just a really hard ask, and pick sixes are a dime a dozen, or not necessarily a dime a dozen, actually quite the opposite of that. Really, really hard to come by and really hard to generate. But this is the Penn State defense that is outstanding from top to bottom. Yeah, they kind of got exposed a little bit against Oregon, but that was a high-tempo offensive game, and neither defense really looked their best. Penn State is really good at defending the run. That is important because you go up against the best running back in the country and a guy that I feel was snubbed of the Heisman Trophy. A lot of other people out there feel that way as well. It's Ashton Jeanty. Let me read the stat line for Ashton Jeanty this year, because if he gets, I believe it's near 130 rushing yards, give or take, might be a little more, might be a little less, he's going to break the all-time rushing record held by Barry Sanders. He's got 2,497 yards and 29 rushing touchdowns this season, and he averages over 7.3 yards per carry. Penn State has faced some really good running backs this year. Jordan James and Noah Whittington at Oregon, Travion Henderson and Quinshad Judkins at Ohio State, and that Ohio State rushing attack was able to tear this Penn State defense up. Ashton Jeanty is a different beast. We talk about running back duos, and Penn State's got a great one of their own. When you talk about dominant forces throughout college football, there is no one that has been more dominant, maybe outside of Travis Hunter, than Ashton Jeanty. I would argue Ashton Jeanty's been the most dominant player in the country this year. And this Penn State rush defense has had moments where they have been exposed. Again, you just heard me mention the Ohio State game. Even though the Buckeyes did not shell out a ton of points, put a ton of points up on that scoreboard, the Buckeyes still 176 yards and 4.4 yards per carry, 6.8 yards per carry for Quinshon Judkins, and 5.4 yards per carry for Travion Henderson. You go back and you look at the Big Ten championship game, where, again, I just told you the defense did not have it at all. Oregon was able to rush for 4.5 yards per carry. You give Ashton Jeanty even 4 yards per carry, it could end up being a really, really long day for this Penn State defense. That is just how good he is. But Ashton Jeanty has a massive task ahead, because this, as Penn State's offensive line has won the battle at the line of scrimmage more often than not this season, so has the Penn State defensive front. You look at what they did in the Big Ten championship game against the Oregon Ducks. They were able to get a sack. They forced 6 tackles for loss in that contest there as well. On top of the 3 interceptions, 2 of them going back for pick sixes, the Penn State defense had 3 sacks and 11 tackles for loss against the SMU Mustangs. Ashton Jeanty's got to be able to break into the second level of that defense. And even when you get into the second level, they're still pretty good at not necessarily allowing the big runs to be ripped off this Penn State Nittany Lion defense. But this offense is a lot more than Ashton Jeanty. Yes, Jeanty has a massive task ahead, and he is the forefront of this offense. But you saw Dylan Gabriel torch this Penn State secondary. Gabriel went for 283 passing yards there in that game. It's a secondary with Penn State that can be susceptible. Now, I don't think Boise State has the matchup advantage on the outside that Ohio State or Oregon or some of the other teams in the college football playoff could have against this Penn State secondary. And we've seen Oregon and Ohio State take advantage of both of those matchup advantages on the outside. Boise State has still got some pretty good wide receivers, and they have a quarterback in Maddox Madsen with a dual threat ability that could end up being pretty dangerous. Now, Ashton Jeanty's got to have a big game, yes, but I also believe that Maddox Madsen has to be the X factor here in this game, because there are going to be moments, and we saw this happen against UNLV, especially within that first meeting after Ashton Jeanty got hurt, where he was slowed, he was slowing down, he was not being as dynamic. Maddox Madsen picked it up. This wide receiver group picked it up. He's got 22 touchdowns and 3 interceptions on the year. Not a great touchdown number compared to some of the other quarterbacks in the country, but that's a phenomenal touchdown to interception ratio. If he doesn't turn the football over and he makes smart decisions with the football, Maddox Madsen and this wide receiver room becoming an X factor led by Cam Camper and Lauder and Caples and so many other names, that is going to be a massive advantage for Boise State. If they are able to generate something in the pass game and Ashton Jeanty is solving this Penn State defensive front, I think Boise State is going to be a very tough offense to slow down. Now, Penn State's going to come away with their sacks. They're going to come away with their tackles for loss. If you're this Boise State offensive front, it's been stout all season long, and this is the Boise State offense that just doesn't turn the football over. Also, why I said you can't really count on Penn State coming away with 3 takeaways again, because, well, forcing 3 takeaways from this Boise State team would be almost 33% of the turnovers they've had through 13 games so far this season. Penn State's got to be able to slow down Ashton Jeanty. They have got to be able to make Ashton Jeanty win them the game. Because if Ashton Jeanty is running well and Maddox Madsen is hitting his throws, that's where this game gets very interesting to me. But turnovers will have to benefit Penn State again. Penn State is going to do the little things well they have all season long. They're a great third down defense. They get to the quarterback. They force tackles for loss. They got 20 turnovers forced in 3 in that last game against the SMU Mustangs. They had no turnovers forced against Oregon. The defense couldn't find its rhythm, and you saw what happened there. If you are Boise State, you got to come out and start fast, and Ashton Jeanty has got to set the tempo and has got to set sort of the mood. There's another word that I'm looking for that I can't really find right now, but Ashton Jeanty has got to set the tone. There you go. Ashton Jeanty's got to be able to set the tone early. I think if Boise State does that, it's a huge advantage for this Broncos team. Now, who is going to win the game in Glendale? Penn State is the heavily favored team here. They are favored by double digits. 10.5 points is, again, the line and odd I have as of recording this video. I sort of compile a bunch of sports books, spew out this number and the over and under mark in there as well. I think Boise State can make this game very interesting because Ashton Jeanty, not even Oregon could slow him down. And if Ashton Jeanty is not injured or beat up or any of that, he runs really, really well every single game. This is a Penn State run defense that has their hands full, and I think Ashton Jeanty is going to be able to rip off some big runs here and there throughout this game. But I see Nick Singleton, Katron Allen being a little too much for this Boise State rush defense, that when the moment has mattered most, it has struggled a little bit, and it struggled in the Mountain West Championship game against UNLV. And I don't think Maddox Madsen is going to be a big enough factor in this game for it to lead to a Boise State win. But I think this game is a little bit closer than most people are going to think. I think Boise State is going to keep this game pretty interesting, and with their ability to get into the backfield, I think it does create a little bit of problems for this Penn State offense. But I think Penn State is too physical on both lines of scrimmage. I think the run game is going to be able to be too prolific here in this one, and the Penn State Nittany Lions will move on to the college football playoff semifinal. I got a final score of 27-20. There are a lot of ways in which I think Boise State makes this game interesting, but Penn State is too physical, especially defensively. They're too skilled. I think they're going to outmatch and out-talent the Boise State Broncos in staying undefeated in the Fiesta Bowl. This should be a great one. It's a night game, New Year's Eve from Glendale. What more could you ask for? Hey, let me know what you guys think about this one in the comment section down below. And we still got 3 more quarterfinal games to preview, all on New Year's Day. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder, and I'll see all you guys in the next video. It's Texas and Arizona State. Goodbye.